Imagine standing at a crossroads in life, with two completely different paths in front of you. One road promises stability, a steady paycheck, and the respect of society. The other road seems uncertain at first, but it offers freedom, independence, and the chance to build wealth beyond what most people can imagine. Which road would you choose? This is not just a random question. It's the same choice Robert Kiyosaki had to face as a young boy. His life was shaped by the advice of two very different men, two fathers with opposite views about money, work, and success. The lessons he learned became the foundation of one of the most influential financial books in the world, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Robert grew up listening to two voices. His biological father, the poor dad, was highly educated, worked as a respected teacher, and firmly believed in the traditional path: study hard, get a good job, save money, and slowly climb the career ladder. To him, security meant a stable paycheck and a pension. Yet, even with all his education, he struggled constantly with bills, lived paycheck to paycheck, and worried endlessly about money. On the other side stood his rich dad, the father of his childhood best friend. This man did not have a fancy degree or a government title, but he possessed something far more powerful: financial wisdom. Rich Dad owned businesses, invested in properties, and truly understood how money worked. He believed that real education wasn't only about school. It was about learning how to make money work for you instead of being trapped working for money. Robert found himself torn. Poor Dad insisted, get a good job for security. Rich Dad countered, create jobs for others. Poor Dad warned, money is the root of all evil. Rich Dad argued, the lack of money is the real root of evil. Both men loved Robert, and he respected them equally. But as he watched their lives unfold, the differences were too clear to ignore. Poor Dad, despite his intelligence and degrees, was constantly stressed about bills. Rich Dad, though less educated in school, was calm, confident, and always planning for the future. One day Robert asked Rich Dad, "Why are you never worried about money?" Rich Dad smiled and answered, "Because I understand how money works. Most people spend their lives working for money, but never learn how to make money work for them." That single idea planted a seed in Robert's mind. It made him question everything he had been taught. He realized that if he wanted a different future, he had to learn from Rich Dad. And so began his journey into financial education, a journey that would later change not only his own life, but also inspire millions of readers around the globe. Think about your own life for a moment. Most of us are raised with the same advice: go to school, study hard, get a safe job, and save for retirement. But has anyone truly taught us how to grow money? How to escape the endless cycle of working only to pay bills? Our beliefs about money often decide whether we spend our lives stressed and broke or confident and free. Money, as Rich Dad explained, is simply a tool. If you see it as dangerous or evil, you'll push it away. But if you see it as something that can create opportunities, you'll discover doors you never thought existed. Imagine standing at a fork in the road. One path leads to debt and financial stress, the other to independence and freedom. Wouldn't you want to know how to take the second path? One of the most powerful lessons Rich Dad shared was this: the rich don't work for money. At first, Robert was confused. After all, isn't money the reason everyone works? But Rich Dad explained, the poor and middle class spend their lives working for money. The rich, however, find ways to make money work for them. That is the difference. He described the rat race, a trap that keeps people running in circles. As children, we're told to study hard to get good grades. Then we find a job and begin working. With our salary, we buy a house, a car, maybe even take out loans. But every new purchase brings new bills, mortgages, taxes, and responsibilities. The harder we work, the more we owe. And so the cycle continues, year after year. To make this clearer, Rich Dad gave an example. Imagine a man named John who earns $3,000 a month. When John gets a raise and begins earning $4,000, instead of saving or investing, he buys a bigger house and a nicer car. His expenses rise along with his income. Soon, he's stuck working harder just to cover his new lifestyle. John thinks he's progressing, but really, he's trapped deeper in the rat race. Robert realized that his poor dad was caught in this exact cycle, and he didn't want the same future. Rich Dad then explained what true financial freedom means: having enough income from your investments or assets to pay for your expenses. Once you reach that point, you don't have to work unless you choose to. Your money works for you, not the other way around. Many people believe that being rich simply means earning a high salary. But Rich Dad warned that even people with high-paying jobs can be broke if their expenses are too high. Real wealth comes from owning assets that generate income, not from a paycheck that disappears every month. To make this lesson practical, Rich Dad broke it down into two simple ideas: assets and liabilities. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket, even when you're not working. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. He gave Robert two examples. Case 1. A young man saves $10,000 to buy a car. The car requires fuel, insurance, and repairs, and it loses value over time. Instead of making him richer, it slowly drains his money. That's a liability. Case 2. Another man saves the same $10,000 but invests it in a small piece of land. He rents the land out for $200 a month. Over time, the land increases in value, and the rent keeps coming in. That's an asset because it puts money directly into his pocket. Robert was amazed. He suddenly understood why so many people feel poor even when they own houses, cars, or expensive clothes. These things might look like wealth, but in reality, they don't create income. They take money out of your pocket instead of putting it in. And here's the important lesson. Financial freedom isn't about how much money you make. It's about how you manage what you already have. A person who earns less but invests wisely can end up richer than someone with a high salary who spends it all. Rich Dad wanted Robert to see that wealth is built not with luck or by working harder, but by thinking differently about money. Luxuries look nice, but they often drain your wallet instead of filling it. That's why Rich Dad explained to Robert that wealthy people think differently about money. The rich don't rush to buy new cars, big houses, or the latest gadgets. Instead, they focus first on assets, things that make money for them, even while they sleep. These assets can take many forms. Some people invest in real estate, renting out apartments or offices. Others buy shares in strong companies, which pay dividends month after month. Many also build businesses, create products, or even invest in their own skills through education, because better knowledge often leads to higher income. The key idea is simple. Assets generate passive income, money that arrives without constant work. Once enough passive income covers their expenses, the rich can enjoy luxuries without fear. They buy nice things with money earned by their assets, not with their salaries. Rich Dad wanted Robert to see that financial freedom begins with this principle. To make it clear, He shared a story of two families, both earning the same income of $5,000 each month. Family A spends nearly everything on rent, food, and entertainment. They live well, but save nothing, and every new month starts from zero. Family B chooses differently. They spend $4,000 and invest $1,000 into stocks and savings. At first, the difference looks small, almost invisible. But with time, Family B's investments grow. Their dividends bring in $500 extra per month. Later, that $500 grows to $1,000, and one day it covers all their monthly costs. Family B becomes free, while Family A is still trapped in the endless rat race. Robert finally saw that wealth is not about how much you earn, but about how you use what you earn. Rich Dad also taught him a mindset trick. Most people think, I can't afford it. The rich ask, how can I afford it? It may sound small, but the difference is enormous. When you say you can't afford something, your brain shuts down, as if the conversation ends there. But when you ask how you can afford it, your brain starts searching for answers. To help Robert train his mind, Rich Dad gave him a challenge. Every time he wanted something expensive, he had to write down 3 possible ways to get it. Maybe cut unnecessary costs, maybe start a small side hustle, or maybe learn a new skill that could increase income. This simple exercise rewired Robert's brain to think like an investor instead of a spender. Still, Robert was nervous. But what if I lose money? He asked. Rich Dad smiled. That's exactly the difference between the poor and the rich. Poor people are so afraid of losing money that they avoid taking any risks. But the rich know that mistakes are part of the process. You don't quit after failure. You learn, adjust, and try again. To guide him, Rich Dad outlined a simple step-by-step plan anyone could follow. First, track your expenses. Write down every dollar you spend for a month. This shows where money leaks out of your pocket. Next, cut the things that aren't necessary, subscriptions you don't use, expensive habits, or impulsive shopping. Then, start small with investing. Buy a few stocks or open a savings account that earns interest. At the same time, focus on learning every single day. Read books about money, attend seminars, or find mentors who already live the life you want. Knowledge is the fuel that keeps financial growth moving. Step 4 is building assets before luxuries. Instead of buying a new phone or car, invest in something that puts money back in your pocket. Maybe start a small online business, buy rental property, or join a partnership with someone who understands investing. And finally, step 5. Reinvest your profits. Don't rush to spend money from your investments. Use it to build even bigger assets, and your wealth will grow much faster. As Robert practiced these habits, he noticed a powerful shift. Money no longer looked like something to spend right away. It started to feel like a tool, like a seed he could plant to grow more. His thinking moved from scarcity, always worrying about not having enough, to abundance, believing that opportunities were everywhere if he kept his eyes open. But Rich Dad wasn't finished. He told Robert that the most important skill of all was learning to control emotions. Robert didn't understand. What do emotions have to do with money? Rich Dad replied, everything. He explained that fear and greed are the 2 emotions that keep most people poor. Fear makes people stay in jobs they dislike because they're terrified of losing a paycheck. Fear stops people from starting a business because they don't want to fail. Many people dream about freedom, but they settle for survival because fear locks them in place. Greed is just as dangerous. It convinces people that happiness will come from bigger houses, faster cars, and luxury brands. But those things only bring more stress and bills. True happiness, Rich Dad said, comes from freedom. The freedom to wake up when you want, to spend time with your family, and to do what you love without worrying about bills. That kind of freedom only comes from building assets and creating passive income. Buying shiny things may impress neighbors, but it will never bring real peace. To fight these emotions, Rich Dad told Robert, you need knowledge. People fear what they don't understand. If you don't understand investing, you'll avoid it. If you don't know how taxes work, you'll overpay. If you don't know how to create wealth, you'll always believe it's impossible. The solution is education. He encouraged Robert to learn 3 things deeply: investments, taxes, and markets. First, study investments like real estate, stocks, and businesses. Second, learn about taxes and how the rich legally pay less through smart strategies. Third, understand markets, when to buy, when to sell, and how to see opportunities. The more you know, Rich Dad said, the less afraid you'll be. Knowledge gives you power. Finally, Rich Dad taught Robert to stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like an investor. If you earn $1,000, a consumer spends it on clothes, gadgets, or entertainment. An investor asks, how can I use this $1,000 to make more? Maybe buy stocks, start a side business, or take a course to gain a new skill. Over time, the investor becomes wealthier while the consumer stays the same or poorer. Rich Dad ended with an exercise. When you walk down the street, he said, don't just look at stores and restaurants as a customer. Ask yourself, how could I own one of these? What does this business need to succeed? Train your mind to see opportunities. Stop being just a consumer and start thinking like an owner. Robert soon realized that opportunities were everywhere once he trained his eyes to see them. He noticed a small cafe for sale in his neighborhood and imagined how it could be turned into a busy coffee shop with the right management. He saw an old house that could be repaired and rented out for monthly income. Even a simple idea for a website or online shop started to look like a possible business. But the moment he began to think this way, doubts came from the people around him. Friends told him he was too young and should wait until he was older and more stable. Others warned him that investing was far too risky. Even his poor dad, who loved him, advised him to forget about risky ideas and focus on a safe job with benefits. Rich Dad was not surprised by this. He explained that people often criticize things they don't understand. Their warnings usually come from their own fears, not from reality. If you keep listening to them, Rich Dad told Robert, you'll live exactly like them. Always working, always tired, and always stuck in the rat race. He encouraged Robert to stay focused and spend more time with people who believed in growth, progress, and success. Surround yourself with those who think big, Rich Dad advised, because their energy will push you forward. He explained that success doesn't require starting with millions of dollars. Small wins build confidence and open the door to bigger opportunities. To prove this point, Rich Dad shared a story about a young woman who wanted to invest but only had $50. Instead of waiting for years to save a large sum, she started small by buying shares in a few companies. Over time, her money grew, and she gained the courage to take bigger steps. That small decision changed the way she saw money forever. Success is a process, Rich Dad explained. It is built step by step, not overnight. Every small win is like a brick in the wall of your future. The more bricks you lay, the stronger your foundation becomes. He wanted Robert to understand that daily habits were the true engine of wealth. He explained that habits shape your future more than sudden luck or big events. If you save and invest a little money every month, it grows like a seed in the ground. But if you spend everything you earn, the seed never gets planted. Your habits decide whether you stay poor or become free, Rich Dad said. Then, he gave Robert a simple formula. First, pay yourself before you pay anyone else. This means setting aside money for savings or investments before paying bills or expenses. Second, track your progress by keeping a record of your financial growth. When you see your money grow on paper, you feel motivated to continue. Rich Dad also gave a warning about one of the biggest dangers: impatience. Most people quit because they don't see results right away. They expect to become rich in weeks or months, but real wealth takes years of steady effort. When you plant a seed, he explained, you don't see fruit the next day. You water it, protect it, and wait. In time, it becomes a strong tree that gives fruit year after year. Wealth works the same way. Money itself is not the final goal. Money is a tool. The true goal is freedom. The freedom to spend time with family, follow your passions, travel, and help others. When you reach that point, Rich Dad said, you'll finally understand what it really means to be rich. Robert left that lesson more inspired than ever. He promised himself that he would break free from the endless cycle of working only for a paycheck. He would focus on building assets and creating a life filled with choice, not limitation. He was ready for the next step. One day, Rich Dad told him that he was ready to learn the most important truth of all. Wealth, he said, doesn't come from luck or natural talent. It comes from your mindset, your daily actions, and your willingness to work hard. Robert leaned closer, excited to hear more. Rich Dad continued, everyone dreams about being rich, but very few people actually take action. They wait for the perfect time, the perfect idea, or the perfect job. But the truth is, there is no perfect time. The best time to start is always now. He gave Robert an example of two friends. The first kept saying, I'll start saving and investing when I earn more money. The second began immediately, saving just $10 each week. After 10 years, the second friend had built a strong financial foundation, while the first was still waiting for the right moment. Opportunities are everywhere, Rich Dad explained. But only those who take action can see results. Don't wait until you feel completely ready. Start with what you already have. He reminded Robert that failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of the path. Every successful person has failed many times. Rich Dad told Robert a story about a businessman who launched 5 companies, all of which collapsed. People laughed at him, called him foolish, and said he would never succeed. But he didn't quit. On his 6th attempt, he created a company that became wildly successful and changed his life forever. Do you think he would have succeeded if he stopped after the first failure? Rich Dad asked with a smile. He explained that financial freedom requires discipline. It is easy to spend money, but it takes strength to save and invest it. That is why he repeated his golden rule: always pay yourself first. Even if bills and debts are waiting, Rich Dad insisted that Robert put something aside for investments first. This habit forces you to be creative with the rest of your money, he explained. It makes you smarter, more resourceful, and more disciplined. And discipline is what builds lasting wealth. Finally, Rich Dad pointed out that doubts and fears destroy more dreams than failure ever could. Your thoughts shape your reality, he said. If you focus on your fears, you will find reasons to quit. But if you focus on growth, you will always find ways to succeed. If you keep your eyes fixed on your fears, you will always discover excuses to quit. But when you focus on your dreams and goals, your mind naturally begins searching for solutions, and step by step, those solutions appear. Rich Dad often reminded Robert that the difference between ordinary people and successful ones is not luck, but perspective. Successful people look for possibilities, while others see only problems. As their lessons were coming to an end, Rich Dad decided to share one final piece of advice. It was a lesson Robert did not expect. The richest people, Rich Dad said, are not just those with the most money in the bank. The truly wealthy are the ones who give back. Robert was surprised and confused. How can giving make someone richer? He asked honestly. Rich Dad smiled and explained that wealth is not only about what you take in, but also about what you put out into the world. When you give, you create value that multiplies far beyond your own life. Giving can take many forms. It may be sharing your knowledge with someone who is just beginning, mentoring a young entrepreneur, donating to a cause, or simply helping a neighbor. Each act of giving creates ripples that touch many lives. And surprisingly, those ripples often return to you in unexpected ways, bringing new friendships, opportunities, and fulfillment. To make this point clear, Rich Dad told Robert a story about a businessman he knew. This man had built a fortune, but instead of spending it only on himself, he created a scholarship fund for underprivileged students. Hundreds of young people were able to study, build careers, and change their lives because of his generosity. This act of giving did not only transform the students' futures, it also gave the businessman deep joy and respect from the community. Because of his reputation for kindness, many doors opened for him. New partnerships, powerful connections, and even more business opportunities. You see, Robert, Rich Dad said, true wealth always grows when it is shared. Rich Dad's final words carried another powerful message. The moment you stop learning, you stop growing. Knowledge, he explained, is like water. It must keep moving to stay fresh. If you think you already know everything, you close the door to improvement. But if you stay curious and hungry to learn, life will always give you chances to rise higher. Years later, Robert looked back on his journey and realized how deeply Rich Dad's lessons had changed him. He had achieved financial freedom, but more importantly, he had gained confidence, discipline, and a new way of seeing life. He no longer measured wealth only in dollars, but in freedom, joy, and the ability to help others. Robert began to share this message with the world. He wanted everyone to understand that it doesn't matter where you start in life. Even if you begin with nothing, you have the power to change your future. What truly matters is your mindset, the thoughts you choose to believe, and the actions you are willing to take. Wealth, he explained, is not only about collecting money. It is about building a life filled with meaning, where you have the freedom to follow your passions, spend time with loved ones, and leave a positive mark on others. This kind of wealth brings happiness that money alone can never buy. As this story comes to a close, remember that your own journey to financial freedom can begin right now. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment or the perfect amount of money. You can start small, with simple actions, and build step by step. Stay consistent. Learn from your mistakes instead of letting them stop you. Dare to dream bigger than your fears, and never, ever give up. Because the only real limit to your success is the one you create in your own mind. The world is filled with opportunities, opportunities waiting for someone like you to notice them and take the first step. Your time is now. Make it count and begin building the life you have always imagined.